It's a funny offense to work because if public corruption works the way it's supposed to, nobody talks about it. Because you have someone who wants that official, that public official, to get something done for them. And then the public official says, well, I can do it for a price. And as long as they're both happy with the arrangement, neither one of them is going to talk about it.
Welcome to episode 373 of FBI Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent John McMurtrie, who served in the FBI for over 28 years. In this episode, he reviews his police corruption investigation where drug dealers operating in Eufaula, Alabama, complained about being extorted for cash by members of the Eufaula Police Department. The dealers cooperated with the FBI investigation and made consensual recordings that led to the arrest and conviction of a police captain, his lieutenant, and the local district attorney. John also reviews the worst assignment of his FBI career, serving a warrant to search the contents of a septic tank. You're not going to believe this one. The lead was part of the Birmingham, Alabama mail bombing of U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Robert Vance. John McMurtrie is the author of FBI Special Agent on the Outside, Pennsylvania State Police Trooper on the Inside, or How I Went from the Big Hat to the Little Badge, a memoir reflecting on his 25-year journey through his law enforcement career. After 7 years as a Pennsylvania trooper, John joined the FBI and was assigned to the Mobile Division, Dothan, Alabama Resident Agency, the Newark Division, and the Memphis Division in the Nashville Resident Agency. Note, Memphis is now the RA out of the Nashville Division. During John's bureau career, he worked public corruption, South American drug trafficking organizations, and violent crime and street gangs. John was a firearms instructor, a tactical instructor, and an active shooter rapid response tactics instructor. He also served on the Memphis SWAT team as a certified team operator. John retired as the coordinator for the Nashville RA Violent Crime and Child Exploitation Task Force, which investigated violent crimes against children, sexual abuse of children, and sex traveler cases. He supervised officers from state and local agencies deputized to perform duties as task force officers. After his retirement, John was hired as a contract program director with the U.S. Department of State. Based stateside, John oversaw the operations supporting a team of 8 Americans working with law enforcement and prosecutors in criminal matters in Kosovo. Later, he was Director of Safety and Security for Maryville College in Maryville, Tennessee. Currently, John is retired full-time. Now, before we get to the case review, I have 2 things. First of all, I keep forgetting to tell you that I am going to Thailand. I'll be there for 2 weeks, so if you live in Bangkok or Phuket, send me an email. Maybe we can meet up. I'll bring some podcast swag, some stickers and buttons. I'm already set to meet up with retired agent John Shaknowski, who lives in Bangkok. I just interviewed him for a podcast episode, which will be posted at the end of November. So I'm looking forward to actually meeting him in person. The other thing is, I've been invited to speak about the FBI in books, TV, and movies at the Wilmington University True Crime Series. If you're going to be in the Philadelphia, Delaware area on November 11th, that's Veterans Day, I hope to see you there. The event is free. The link to register is on the homepage of my website, jerrywilliams.com. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a link to the show notes. You'll also find links to where you can buy me a cup of coffee, join my reader team about crime fiction and the FBI in books, TV, and movies, and learn more about me and my books. Thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, retired agent John McMurtrie. Hey, John, how are you?
Good morning, Jerry. Fine.
Great. I just finished reading your book, FBI Agent on the Outside, Pennsylvania State Police Trooper on the Inside, or, as the subtitle goes, How I Went from the Big Hat to the Little Badge. I love the title.
Well, I tried to have some fun with it.
I had a chance to read it, and after reading it, we decided that we were going to concentrate this case review on one of the cases that you worked early in your career when you were in, was it Mobile?
Mobile Division, Dothan, RA, Resident Agency Office.
Okay. And of course, there are many things that you cover in the book, but that case just seemed like an investigation that would be important to talk about because it involves color of law, police corruption. It was such a blatant example of corruption that I really wanted to go into it in more detail. Where would you like to start?
Probably how the case first began.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had never worked public corruption cases before. In fact, as a former police officer, I was a Pennsylvania State Police trooper from 1980 to 1987 before I left and went with the Bureau as an agent. Typically, the policy was that if you had prior law enforcement experience, you did not work public corruption cases involving other law enforcement officers. In this case, the office that I was assigned to was Mobile Field Division, Dothan Resident Agency Office in Dothan, Alabama, which is in the southeast corner of Alabama. It's about 15 miles north of the Florida state line and about 25 from Georgia, so it's tucked right in the corner. It's a major pass-through city on the way to the beach for a lot of people from that part of the country that get down to Panama City. Great place, brand new first office agent. I'm learning every day. I fortunately had the background as a trooper to fall back on. At least that was a good base to work from to learn how to become an agent, which I was in the process at this point. So I got to Dothan. They assigned me when I graduated from Quantico at the end of 1987. My wife and I packed up and left the Pittsburgh area and got moved down there in late 87 and started as an agent right after the new year, working in Dothan at the beginning of 1989. This case started in 1990. The initiation of it was when I was at the RA, was a 4-agent resident agency officer, RA, no support employees, no support help whatsoever. So we did all of our own mail, all of the housekeeping for the RA. It was kind of a do a lot with less situation. If we had left the office, which typically the 4 agents that were there, myself included, would be going 4 different directions. I rarely worked with one of the other agents unless it was something more of a major quality to it as far as case or running leads. We had an answering machine that would pick up the calls, and whoever got back to the office first was required to clear the answering machine, leave notes if they had people calling in with information, whatever, so they could return those calls. Well, I was alone in the office this day in the afternoon. Phone rang, answered it. Individual on the other end explained how he was calling because he wanted to report a public corruption matter within the Eufaula Police Department. Eufaula is a relatively small town. It's an old town. It's an old southern town, about an hour north of Dothan, but it was in one of the 2 counties that I had responsibility for. The resident agency office covered 7 counties, and I had 2 of those. It was Barber County and Henry County. So I had law enforcement connections in both those counties to work cases, run leads, et cetera. So the person that called in said, well, here's what happened to me. I was in my house. All of a sudden, Eufaula PD, police department officers kick my door in. They plant drugs in my house and arrest me and put me in jail. I'm in jail for several days, and I finally get a visit in my cell from one of the Eufaula detectives, and he lays out this extortion case. These weren't his words, but essentially this is what happened. The detective laid out an extortion demand to this person that he had arrested, that unless he paid to make the arrest go away, he was going to go to jail and be convicted for drug possession. Now, the person reporting this was, in fact, a convicted drug dealer. That's what he did. There was no question about that. But this whole matter of being extorted to pay to make this arrest go away, which apparently was false because the planting of the drugs, was a whole nother scheme entirely. So I listened to him patiently, and the detective he named was someone I knew and worked with. When I went up to Eufaula, I would run a lead up there once in a while. And I always called him if I had a chance before I'd go up, say, hey, Bill, his name was William, first name was William. And I said, Bill, I'm coming up your way. I've got to do this type of lead. Do you have time to hook up with me, or are you working today? Well, he helped me probably 9 times out of 10. He knew the area, knew the people, knew the local conflicts, the background of people. He was just invaluable to work with. Good guy. Liked the guy, had fun working with him. This is who he named as the person who made the extortion demand. So I'm like, yeah, sure. This can't be happening. So I said, well, if we can substantiate this and put a case together against this detective and Eufaula PD, would you be willing to testify? Yeah, I'll testify. Great. So what you need to do is you need to come down here and we're going to put a call into him and I'm going to record it and you're going to talk to the detective and see if any of this can be substantiated by you talking with him on the phone. Not a problem. He comes down. Between the time he and I spoke and when he actually showed up at the RA office, I called the U.S. Attorney's Office in Montgomery, which handled our cases for that district, and explained the situation to the on-duty AUSA who was taking incoming calls. Said, listen, here's what I have so far. This is what I have started in place. We're going to put a call into him, et cetera. Got authority, concurrence to actually place and record the call, and the assurance that if we put a case together that they would consider prosecuting it, which is the only assurance you could ever really get from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They never promised to prosecute anything. They wanted to see the complete case, and then they would make a decision on it. So that was just standard procedure.
As you're making these calls, what is your gut feeling? Because you know this detective and you're talking to somebody who's a convicted drug dealer, but you're proceeding. So what were you thinking?
I was proceeding despite the 100% skepticism I had about the reality or validity of the accusation he was making against the detective. I had no idea that I was proven wrong. I just thought, no, this can't be happening.
The only thing that would have made me think that maybe this is for real is because he made this call to the FBI knowing that there was a clear possibility that you would hang up the phone and call the detective.
Right.
He felt so strongly about being extorted that he made that call to the FBI despite all of the risk.
True. And I think what it was, he was really offended that they thought they could do that to him. The bureau down there was, I don't know how it is these days, but we were looked at as like the last resort and we could be trusted. They couldn't trust the locals, but they could trust us. That was, I think, a common feeling among the population down there. We had calls from people complaining about various agencies or police departments in their area because they looked at us as the final arbiter, an agency that would actually listen to them and pursue an investigation if needed.
That makes sense, and I hope it's still true today.
I think it's from the work of the agents over decades in those areas where they did take people seriously despite whatever the allegation was and worked to pursue it. The second call, after the call to the assistant U.S. attorney that I spoke with, I called my supervisor in Montgomery, and we had kind of an interesting setup with supervision process of the RA. There were 4 agents in the RA. One had been there when I got there, I think, for 22 or 23 years. So he was the senior resident agent, but he didn't have supervisory responsibility for the rest of us. Our nearest supervisor was in Montgomery, Alabama, which was 105 miles north of Dothan. And then our headquarters city, Mobile, was about 4.5 hours travel time from Dothan. So to say we were on our own is pretty accurate. But the supervisor's a phone call away. So next call, I made it to my supervisor, ran a situation by him, was very honest with him. I don't know if this has any validity to it, if these are actual facts or just he's making this up to try to make the police department look bad, and specifically this one detective. But I said, this is what I plan to do. He says, go ahead, do it. You got concurrence from the U.S. Attorney's Office to make and record the call. Go right ahead. I support you and let me know what you need. I get off with him. It was an hour for this person to drive down to Dothan. So he showed up at the RA, sat down with him for a few minutes, went over my notes from the call when he called in at first to make sure it was completely accurate. And I went through the process with him of, okay, here's a consent form for me to record your call, which, all legally I'm required to do by Bureau protocol as well. He signed off on the form. I had a witness. We had what we called a hello phone in the RA, fortunately, that didn't come back to the Bureau or had any connection with a government agency. It was registered under a false name and address, but we could use it to make calls like these. Back in those days, there really wasn't much in the way of caller ID. This is 1990. That was a few steps in the future. So we made the call. I put him on the phone. He dials the number of the police department, asks to speak with the detective. Detective picks up the call, and he goes into the conversation that this witness, this victim who's in my office, says, hey, this is so-and-so. Is there any way to fix a legal problem that I have right now with you? The detective comes back with, there is, but you're going to have to pay for it to go away. The source that's eventually we named this person cooperative witness number 1. The cooperative witness says, would $10,000 help? And the detective responds, that'll work, but it's going to happen quickly.
Wow.
And my stomach just sank. I thought, oh man, I cannot believe that this is true. He went over the other details. The cooperative witness recounted what happened at his house. The detective didn't dispute any of it. In fact, chimed in and confirmed it during the conversation. Eventually, we terminated it. And I took the tape and became evidence. I told the cooperative witness, I said, okay, what we'll have to do is we're going to make arrangements to make a payment through you to this detective, probably within the week to 10 days if I can set it up, because it took some logistical planning to do that. He said, okay, no problem, we'll do it. And I said, we're going to put a body recorder on you. Not a problem. I'll do that. I'll wear a wire. I said, okay, great. Thank you very much. And he left. The next calls were to the assistant U.S. attorney that I had spoken to let him know that so far we had verification at this point of the detective essentially putting his head inside a noose to incriminate himself during this phone call. I was going to pursue it with a payment. He concurred with that and called my supervisor back. I said, well, we're in it. I said, it's confirmed. He was disappointed as well because he knew the department and also knew, I told him I had a relationship with the detective as far as, working with him and respected him. Next thing was to make the arrangements to get the cash transferred to a bank account in Dothan. I think it was a $10,000 payment. So we had the cash wire transferred by Mobile from that office into a bank account in Dothan. I went and withdrew the money and photocopied all of it, which legally you're not supposed to photocopy money, but this was in the interest of having it as evidence so we could trace it if it turned up somewhere, any part or all of it. Photocopied all the money and then set up the meeting had to have the cooperative witness come back and make another phone call to set up a payment meeting with the detective, which that went off just like the first call. The detective said, okay, just meet me here at such and such time and make sure you have the money with you, further cementing the fact that this was an actual extortion attempt. We set the meeting up, which was really awkward because that territory is very rural. I mean, you have towns within it. Enterprise is a larger one. Dothan's a larger one. Eufaula is not a larger one. It's a relatively smaller town. They met away from town on these back roads. Trying to surveil that was extremely difficult. We realized that we were kind of handicapped because he knew my vehicle. So I had to team up with another agent in the office in a different vehicle, try to run the surveillance with the four of us, the four agents that were there. We pulled it off. We actually confirmed that the cooperative witness did go and meet with him before the meeting. I gave him the money, had him sign for the cash, and put a Nagra recording device, taped it to his back with microphones up in his chest. Meeting went off without a hitch. He paid the money, separated. I had him do some basic surveillance cleaning effort. He made sure that the detective didn't follow him after they met to see where he was going afterwards, and met with the source, got the recording device off of him. Of course, the money was gone. That was paid to the detective, and said, okay, we'll set up another meeting cash payment when we get a chance.
Oh, so he had to pay more than $10,000.
It was two payments. I think it was $15,000 total. We paid the first installment of $10,000.
Wow. In addition to you physically seeing this, did you also have photographs and video?
No, we did not. Not back in those days. It was more a visual surveillance. We had cars in position that were close enough to see that it was the detective's car. I think we got the tag off of it and an opportunity during the surveillance. But it was his vehicle that I was familiar with, his issued vehicle from Eufaula PD. So it was all more of an accounting, a written accounting of what was witnessed in person that day, as opposed to video or photographs.
Which, of course, today would be expected.
Demanded.
Yeah, demanded.
What do you mean you don't have this on video?
Simpler times.
It was. We may do more with less.
Yeah. So what happened next?
Between the time when the first cooperative witness came forward, the reason I call him first will become obvious here in a second, and the actual meeting and payment made to the detective, 2 days after he came down to the office and we made the first call, another cooperative witness came forward with the same story, same detective, but he also included the detective's captain as being part of this.
Oh, this is getting worse.
It got worse.
And these two cooperating sources, did they know each other? Is that why the second one showed up? Because the first one felt that he had been successful in talking to you?
He may have. I never confirmed that. They knew each other, I'm sure, but they told me they didn't. Eufaula is such a small town. It's unlikely that someone in that area would not know another competition drug dealer. It's just very unlikely.
Right. And also, you would think that if there is law enforcement shaking down drug dealers, they all know too.
Exactly. Yeah, within that community, because there had to be some cooperation. It wasn't like a dog against dog. I'm not going to cooperate or have anything to do with it. They all knew where their sources of the drugs were and how their operations went, I'm sure. This first one probably did tell the second, oh, it happened to you. Well, this is what I did. And that's how I got the second call from the second cooperative witness.
And of course, we don't know how many times they had done this already, and the person just shut up and paid.
Exactly. And not excusing the actions of any of these officers that wound up convicted of this. Southern law enforcement in general just has historically been very underpaid. And I think if you have someone who just doesn't have the moral backbone to power on through and do what they can to survive on whatever they're being paid in that position, you have things like this happen. The second cooperative witness stepped forward, called me, same situation. I was alone in the office, took the call, and went through the same process with him. I said, would you be willing to make a recorded phone call? Yes, I will. Will you testify? Yes, I will. Called the assistant U.S. attorney that I now had assigned to the case because we had opened the case at this point and got concurrence for the recorded call, explained the circumstances. Called my supervisor, gave him the lovely news that we now had a second cooperative witness coming forward with the same exact story for the most part. He's go ahead, act on it. We'll get some money wire transfer if it plays out with a phone call. When he came down to the office, cooperative witness number 2 made a call, recorded it. The call that he made wound up being taken by the captain that he claimed was involved. The conversation with the captain, same as the detective before, confirmed all the details. That, yeah, he was supposed to make this cash payment of money to make the arrest go away, that it just occurred. The wrinkle that came up, which I was really surprised with, we started making multiple payments to both the detective and the captain. The captain actually showed up to receive a payment that had been scheduled with the detective, but something happened in the detective's schedule. He couldn't make it. So the captain actually showed up in person to accept the payment from one of the cooperative witnesses. The detective showed up for a scheduled payment and had a device with him, which he referred to as a bug detector. He refused to talk to the cooperative witness until he ran this device all over the witness's body, trying to detect a transmitter. Fortunately, we didn't have a transmitter. All we had was a body recorder in those days at that point, as far as the equipment we were using, which worked for the most part. I think I had one meeting, and I think this might have been it, where it failed. There was a short in the power supply, and the device just stopped working. So we got a partial recording, but that was it.
For those who are not in law enforcement, if you could explain the difference between the body recorder and the transmitter. What does the transmitter do and give you that the recording doesn't allow you to do?
The difference between the Nagra body recorder, which is what we were using in those days, and it was fairly bulky. I mean, I never felt comfortable putting it on anybody. I'll be honest, just felt that they were going to find it. An opposing party was going to search them and find it. The difference between the devices, the Nagra body recorder and any other body recorder, they just passively record within recording distance of the device, of the microphones that are being used. So typically, meetings were held in vehicles, in this case, of mine. So it would record the conversation between whichever cooperative witness was wearing it and whether either the detective or the captain that showed up to accept the payment. The transmitter is an active device which is actively transmitting whatever it's hearing from inside of the car, in this example, to our receivers on the radios that we had as agents. So there's actually a transmitted signal that leaves that device and goes to the radios so we could record it in our vehicles live time. So it's a real-time transmission device. The device that he used, had we had one of our transmitters on either one of the CW, the cooperative witnesses, it probably would have picked it up. He probably would have just found the transmitter, found the body recorder, and the whole case would have ended right at that point.
Usually, when we use a transmitter, it's because we might fear for the safety of the cooperator. And this way, you can hear exactly what's going on and act if something dangerous is about to happen.
Absolutely. I worked a case when I was in Newark Division, and we had an undercover agent. He was an FBI agent from another agency, one of our other partners. We always had a transmitter on him because we were so concerned when he went into, as we call it, the bad guy territory, that something was going to happen that we would have to immediately respond to and effect a rescue of him to get him out of that situation. The payments were going off without a hitch. I know, Jerry, as an agent, retired agent, you're familiar with all this, but the public probably is not. I started to bump up against the rules of the Bureau, administrative rules, and the type of investigations which involved payments and undercover activity. The case was going on, we were making payments, and I started to run afoul of Bureau regulations, so to speak. And my supervisor and I talked about this. He brought it up and said, if this continues, we're going to have to put in to open a Group 2. Well, I had no idea what a Group 2 was. When I went through Quantico, that was something that I believe was mentioned to us, but it was never really explained fully because the instructors at Quantico relied upon the field division and you having a training agent to teach you a number of these esoteric aspects of the Bureau. There were group ones and group twos. And essentially what I found out was a group two, you had to formally submit an application to headquarters and have it approved to have a group two undercover operation. So it was a group two UCO. The funding for group twos were handled within existing budget sources for the division in which the group two investigation was opened. Group ones were funded by headquarters, directly funded. Normally, the course of action was you open a case, you work it for a while, you realize it's going to continue with undercover operations within it. So you apply to open a group two undercover operation within your division. It gets approved by the SEC, it's run by headquarters, they bless off on it, and you use bureau funds, including whatever exists already, to fund the operation, to fund the case. We use as case funds. After having a group two open for a while, you start running out of funds. That's really the reality of it. You run out of bureau funds as far as the division you're in. And then you want to tap into funds available from headquarters to fund it as a group one. And it becomes a much more higher profile investigation. You have to name it. They have to submit a name for consideration to name the group one. If it's approved, goes through headquarters and they bless off on it, approve the funding for it, then it's reopened as a group one. That's a brief explanation on that process. I didn't do that because the case came to an end. We worked this case from September 11th, 1990 was the day it started, if I recall correctly. As we're working this, we realize that we can only go so far with the case. Speaking with my assistant U.S. attorney who's handling the case on the U.S. attorney's end of things, we decide that what we want to do is basically do an open approach to both the detective and his captain and say, look, we know this is going on. We'd like your cooperation. And if you refuse to cooperate, well, then we'll just prosecute you for what we have at this point, and you can possibly go to federal prison. So we set it up. On the north end of Eufaula, there was a motel that I was familiar with. I ran a fugitive lead. Supposedly a fugitive had stayed in one of the rooms. I called the detective, Bill, and I said, Bill, I got another lead up there. For whatever reason, they think a fugitive stayed in one of the rooms at that hotel. Can you meet me up there tomorrow at such and such time and give me a hand with the lead? He said, oh, yeah, no problem. I'm working tomorrow. I'll meet you up there.
At this point, he has no idea that you are actually involved in an investigation of his activities. He just thinks that you're getting together like you have in the past, working, cooperating as law enforcement partners.
Correct. We had a history of doing this. It was an easy call to make. We set this up with the hotel, and they were very cooperative. We didn't tell them exactly what we were doing, but we rented 2 rooms side by side with a connecting door. So we were in place that morning. I'm not sure what time of day it was. I think it was probably late morning when he showed up for the meeting with me, and I was outside the room. It was just a motel, so you could walk right up the front door of each room. We walked into the one room that we had set up as the fugitives room with the connecting door to the next room, which was filled with agents from Montgomery and the RA, Dothan RA. I forget what I said my verbal signal was for them to open the door and come in. They came into the room. We immediately disarmed the detective, took his service weapon, sat him down and said, okay, this is what we have.
I think it's important to get his reaction when the agents came in the door.
When the agents came from the connecting room through the connecting door, he was absolutely shocked. I mean, he went ashen, gray. He sat down. We took his weapon off of him. He sat down. I'll be honest with you, I could not be the one to speak with him, to lay this out. There was a senior agent who had transferred into the Dothan RA maybe a year before this. Super guy, very good agent, had been with the 10169 group where he hadn't been to a major field office, and I forget what office he was in, but he got sent from a really nice rural posting to downtown Baltimore. He transferred out of there to Dothan at his request. It was an office of preference transfer out of Baltimore to Dothan. He actually took the lead on it. He was a 20-some-year agent, very accomplished agent. I could not get over the hump of having worked with this detective and trusted him to go into the role of, well, we've been investigating you and this is happening, that's happening. I think it was a much better situation that the senior agent actually handled the interview with him, which he did with the U.S. attorney who was present.
Yeah, that had to be a difficult situation because you knew that this guy's life and career, as he knew it, was over.
As of that day, it was over. I felt badly, not to where I would excuse his actions at all. But I had spent 7 years in uniform as a trooper. It's not a highway patrol in Pennsylvania. It's a state police force. We did everything. I went to domestic calls. I went to homicides. Rapes. You worked full-blown crimes, not working traffic patrol. I did that, but that was only part of what I did. As a fellow law enforcement police officer, it was hard to make that separation completely.
Understood. Because the other agents still had that similar background, but they didn't know this guy the way that you knew him. they had not worked directly with him.
Exactly. I had a history with him. To lure him to the hotel, I didn't feel good about that. I did it because it was my duty to do so, but never had a comfortable feeling. I'm not sorry I did what I was supposed to do. But again, when you're doing it at that time, it's not a real nice feeling inside yourself. And I think one of the more effective elements of that meeting that day was the fact we also had the assistant U.S. attorney there with us that was working the case. And she sat down with him and explained exactly what she would do as a prosecutor for him and also against him. It just made the situation that much more clear because instead of him saying, okay, us explaining what's going on, the agents explaining what's going on, and him saying, well, yeah, I'd really like to talk to your attorneys about this, we had the assistant U.S. attorney on scene right there. She answered all the questions he had. And at the end of the conversation with him, he agreed to cooperate. The detective agreed to cooperate at the end of the discussion with the assistant U.S. attorney and the senior agent that I mentioned. The next thing we asked him to do was to contact his captain and have him come out to the hotel under the same premise, false premise, that the fugitive had stayed there. And we just wanted to check the rooms to see if there was he left any evidence behind. Captain shows up, same scenario. We had moved Bill, the detective, over into the adjoining room where the agents had been waiting and closed the door. He came into the room that I was in, connecting room. Door opens up, agents come in, we disarm him, sit him down. The assistant U.S. attorney handling the case made the same argument. This is what can happen. You can refuse to cooperate, or you can't cooperate, and consideration will be given for that cooperation, or we can just prosecute you and put you in prison, possibly. He also was told that the detective had been approached and explained that this is what was happening, and he asked to talk with him before he gave us his answer as far as cooperating or not. We said, okay, that's fine. We brought the detective into the room. They chatted briefly, and Captain asked him, are you going to cooperate? And the detective said, yes, I am. And he said, okay, I will too. So now we have cooperative witness number 3, which is our detective, cooperative witness number 4, the captain, in addition to being subjects in the case, people that would possibly be charged. So the decision was made to make a cash payment because the captain opened up the door telling us with more information that we knew about at that point that the district attorney was actually involved. And it was the district attorney for Barber and Bullock counties by the name of Sam LeMaitre. Sam came from old Southern family. I think his dad had been the district attorney in the same place before him for those 2 counties. And he had been district attorney for probably about 10 years at that point. And I knew him as well. Some months prior to this, he offered to take me golfing up there. And I never took him up on it. But I knew Sam. I was introduced to him by, I think, Bill, because I was up there working. We were doing something. He said, hey, let me introduce you to the district attorney. And went in his office. And he asked me, he said, oh, hey, do you play golf? I said, yeah, I play. Oh, you and I should come play sometime. So I was very familiar with him at that point. When interviewing the captain at the hotel we were at, he advised that the district attorney was also part of this, that he made partial payments of what he was paid to the district attorney. If I recall correctly, the district attorney referred to it as his drug fund. The captain was given cash to pay the district attorney. It was a low amount. I think it was $1,000. Captain went in with a body recorder on. The meeting was set up in the district attorney's office. Captain was given the $1,000 cash, went into the district attorney's office, made the payment. The whole thing was recorded. In a funny twist, the district attorney said, do you want some of this back? The captain said, well, yeah, I could use it. The district attorney gave him $500 of the $1,000 payment back to the captain, who left with it. And then he in turn met with us and gave it back to us and explained what happened. The recording verified what he told us. And for whatever reason, any of these drug payments, because he was apparently the district attorney was aware of the extortion scheme where they would kick in a known drug dealer's door, and there were enough of them to go around up there. There was a significant drug trade. The drugs were to be had, I think, in Panama City. There was a source down there, but also the one cooperative witness that we used, number 2, he actually drove all the way to Miami and brought drugs back from there to sell in Eufaula. The district attorney was aware of the extortion scheme that was happening and was taking money. And as it turned out, the district attorney had money problems of his own. He had a mistress, we found out, in Las Vegas that he would go out to visit. So he was paying for flights out there. He was paying, her rent where she was living. And he, was a little cash strapped because his salary wasn't going the distance to cover all these extraneous expenses, so to speak. So his life was a little bit complicated as well. The first meeting with him where he accepted $1,000 and then gave the captain back the $500 went off without a hitch. The next meeting was a little bit different because the captain set up the meeting, was given the money, and when he went into the office, the captain gave the district attorney the cash, in furtherance of this extortion. The district attorney said, "What's this for?" Very wide-eyed. "I don't know where this came from. How is this money showing up through you?" So he refused to accept it. We suspected, and he actually confirmed it in a subsequent interview, that the district attorney had received a phone call or spoke with someone who said, "Hey, the FBI is investigating you. You need to be careful." I think it comes back to you really don't know who knows who. The offices, both in Mobile, Montgomery, they hired local support employees. They really didn't hire local agents because when you became an agent in my days, you went somewhere else. You never went straight back home. You don't know who knows who. So it could have been a support employee in either one of the two offices, Mobile or Montgomery, that saw paperwork coming across about the case. It could have been someone in the Montgomery U.S. Attorney's office that knew. Attorneys are attorneys. They're part of a club. And if you're not an attorney, you're not in the club. It may have been someone who was familiar with Sam from law school. Any number of possibilities are out there, but someone did tell him that the Bureau was investigating him. So that's what led to, I think, him refusing the second cash payment. At that point, when the captain came back and said, "Hey, I think he knows something's happening," we made a decision. I called the assistant U.S. attorney on the case and said, "Look, this is what just happened. I really think we need to effect an arrest and search his office." I got permission to do a warrantless arrest on the district attorney and actually grabbed several other agents, went to his office and arrested him in his office. He was seated behind his desk. I walked in. He said, "Hey, John." I said, "Hey, Sam." I said, "Do me a favor." I said, "You're under arrest. Stand up and turn around and put your hands on the wall," which after looking a little dumbfounded, he did. He complied, cuffed him, and two of us drove to Montgomery. The case had to be heard up in Montgomery. It couldn't be heard in Dothan because it was in Eufaula in Barber County. So it had to be apparently prosecuted in Montgomery. It couldn't be like a local case for us. We had to take him up and have him appear before a district magistrate and charge him with extortion.
Wow. I mean, not many agents working corruption cases have an opportunity to investigate and arrest a district attorney. How many years did you have in the Bureau at this time?
2 and a partial.
Yeah. So, I mean, wow. Your career takes off like a bullet, like a rocket, with this being one of your first corruption cases.
I learned quite a bit, from this case. It's a funny offense to work because if public corruption works the way it's supposed to, nobody talks about it. Because typically, someone who has the power to do something or get something done, and you have someone who wants that official, that public official, to get something done for them, and then the public official says, "Well, I can do it for a price." And as long as they're both happy with the arrangement, neither one of them is going to talk about it. It's difficult to expose it if it's kind of limping along, working the way the involved parties want it to. Typically, what happens is you have someone who's aware of it, but not like benefiting from it. They find out and they have got a grudge against one of the parties involved. That's when law enforcement's notified about that. It just breaks down at that point.
Yeah, just think about it. If this happened to a drug dealer who legitimately was dealing drugs when the police came in, and then they made this deal with him, pay this money and this will all go away, then he, of course, is not going to talk. But your two drug dealers that came forward were upset because in this particular situation, there was no drugs. It was all made up, and they were indignant that this was happening to them.
That's a perfect way to describe it. They were offended. Eufaula PD was not playing the game that they were supposed to play.
And that was the lucky situation for you because you were there when they made that call into the RA.
Yeah, it was just pure dumb luck. I learned a lot from the case. I had no idea what a group 1 was or group 2. Ironically, when I got transferred to Newark in April of 91 from Dothan, and I was up there almost 7 years, I became the undercover coordinator for the division and the alias and false ID coordinator. In addition to casework, I was handling all of that administrative problems and headaches associated with both because I had other divisions sending me requests for registration plates and driver's licenses from the state of New Jersey. I had a contact in New Jersey within state government, within motor vehicles that I could get those from. And I'd have to get those requests fulfilled. And then I had also, as the undercover coordinator, I had to steer Group 2s and Group 1s through the division approval process, set up a meeting with the ASAC and the supervisor and the case agents involved, and help them lay their case out as to why the divisions should either fund a Group 2 or take the Group 2 that was in existence and upgrade it to a Group 1 if headquarters agree. Then I learned quite a bit.
Wow, but this was certainly a good case, a good learning vehicle for you to learn about police corruption.
It was, not to go on about feeling badly for the officers, but I was up in Montgomery. I ran into the detective, Bill, on the steps of the U.S. courthouse in Montgomery. He said hello. We stopped and talked and chatted. He said to me, after kind of pausing, when you found out about what we were doing, why didn't you just tell us to stop? To paraphrase, I said, you really should have known better. You should have stopped yourself. You never should have done what you did.
Good answer.
Again, felt badly, not that badly, that I wouldn't work the case and do what I had to do as an agent.
Now, I know that you ended up charging them with these two incidents that you had evidence for. But what was your thinking? Did you believe that this had been an ongoing corruption thing that they did? Did you have any idea of whether or not there were other officers or other people in the district attorney's office who were also involved, but you didn't have the evidence to prove that?
We did proffer interviews with all three of them, the district attorney and also both officers, the detective and the captain. They did not give us any information that anyone else was involved in this, nor did they want to talk about anything prior to what we actually had evidence for. They just left that alone. They refused to provide any more information about any of that. It could have existed. I think it probably was in place for some time because I asked Bill, I said, what did you use the money for? And he said, we paid bills with it. He said, I don't get paid much. I was always behind and it helped me pay bills. It wasn't like they went on some fabulous vacation or anything with the money. It was honestly just to keep their households running and funded, which doesn't excuse it.
Yeah, and I guess they justified it in their mind with these are drug dealers,
Mm-hmm.
which still isn't right at all. They're drug dealers. Well, then get them on the actual crimes that they're committing, not trumped up charges that allow you to enhance your salary.
That's what offended both these cooperative witnesses, the actual drug dealers themselves, was they knew the game. If you have drugs and they kick your door in and they arrest you, they've got a warrant, probable cause to search your house. They didn't have a problem with that. That was just part of business. This was a whole aberration away from that. That was not the game they'd signed up for.
How does it all end? Do they go to trial? Do they plead guilty? What happened?
The captain and the detective both pled guilty, and I think they both served a year each in federal prison. I wound up transferred. This all happened in late 1990, and I got transferred in April of 1991 to Newark. Of course, I kept touch with the case and had the case transferred to another agent in Dothan. But at that point, the district attorney kept threatening to go to trial. And my AUSA, my assistant U.S. attorney on that case was, bring it on. We'll go to trial. We'll have these two witnesses come in and testify as to what was going on. And he finally dropped that, and he pled guilty in February of 91 and received a 2-year prison sentence in federal prison. He was disbarred. I think the state of Alabama, eventually, after he served his time and got out, I think they reinstated him to the bar.
He had connections, yeah.
Exactly. He came from an old Southern family, old Southern money. I think people take care of their own, so to speak. And that's, I think, what happened with him. But he did serve time. He's a federal convict, officially.
You sent me 2 newspaper articles about the case, so I'll have those in the show notes for anybody who wants to read them.
Okay, great. The one was the Eufaula Tribune, and the other one was from the Montgomery Advertiser.
We have a little bit of time. Usually I just do one case review, but working in the Dothan, Alabama RA was a treasure trove for you because you also got to work one of the FBI's major investigations, which involved the bombing murder of Judge Robert Vance. We'll just briefly touch on this. First of all, if you could explain to everyone the difference between a case agent and a lead agent.
Case agents typically are agents who either are assigned a new case to open or develop information of their own to open a new case, and they become essentially the manager of that case. They have a supervisor who also oversees it, but they are the person in charge of making case decisions, calling U.S. Attorney's Office, getting concurrence to open a case, and, for example, make consensually recorded phone calls in furtherance of those cases. So as a case agent, you have opened the case typically, and you're now working it. A lead agent is an agent in an office or division that receives a lead from a case agent in another division. Even within the same division, that can happen as well because you have different offices within the field division. What happens with the lead agent is you're assigned, and typically it's a limited task. Something happened in the case, it's related to the area in which you work, and you have connections. The case agent sends a lead through the internal communications that the Bureau has, requesting that you go perform A, B, and C, or A and B, whatever. These are activities which help the case agent further prove his case. It's documentation. It's an interview. It varies as far as what the activity could be. I was a lead agent on a number of cases and really some interesting ones. The case came out of London, our legat over there in London. I ran leads in the New Jersey area for that case as a lead agent, which were really interesting to do.
In the case of this major investigation where this federal judge in Birmingham was murdered, you get the lead because there is a suspect in your territory.
Correct. This is one of those funny occasions. We always made fun of the Bureau radios as agents because they were so grossly incompetent. You couldn't call another agent on the radio. You had to go to a phone and make phone contact. The radios really didn't serve much of a purpose in our cars. I just think it was because we just didn't have the technology built up to at that point for them to be effective. So that was kind of a running joke. Out of the blue, I'm outside Dothan running a lead on one of the cases I had, and the radio comes on, and it's my call number, Special Agent John McMurtrie, Dothan LRA call number, and it's the Mobile dispatch support employee calling for me over this radio that normally never works. I answered the call. I said, go ahead for traffic. The person on the other end directed me to go to a phone and call the Mobile office. I said, okay, give me a couple of minutes. So this is pre-cell phones as far as the Bureau having them issued to anybody or anybody really carrying them. And I find a payphone. I call the office, call Mobile. They put me on with one of the supervisors, one of the agents over there on speakerphone, and they said, hey, we just got a heads up from headquarters. There has been a positive identification by the document examination unit at the lab that there's a suspect in your area that may be involved in this Judge Vance bombing, which had happened maybe several months prior. A number of these bombs went out to people, which they were able to recover, unexploded bombs. They intercepted them before they got to who they were supposed to go to. These various bomb packages, I think there were 3 that didn't explode, 2 or 3, but were sent to different people. One of whom was Judge Vance. His exploded because he opened it and it killed him immediately and seriously injured his wife right before Christmas. What happened was the Bureau Document Examination Unit received labels from these other bomb devices that were recovered that were identical to, apparently, to the one that killed Judge Vance, and examined them and linked them to a typewriter, of all things, that had been used to send letters of an upset nature from an individual who lived in our territory, in the Dothan RA territory, to the 6th District Court, which is what Judge Vance was an appellate court judge on. He sat on the 6th District Court of Appeals federally. They said, okay, we've got a match. The same typewriter was used, and the guy that sent these letters, he's very upset about how the court ruled against him in a court case. He's in your territory. You need to go find where he lives. Here's the address and information we have on him. Team up with the locals as you have to and start getting some background on this guy. I said, okay. I go to the county that he actually lives in, and his name was Wayne O'Farrell. He was essentially a junk business, almost like a flea market inside, but year round. It was a really large Quonset hut type style building. And he had all these shelves and all this stuff. And he would buy things at flea markets or yard sales and then put them in his store and resell them, trying to make money from it. And he lived outside Enterprise, Alabama. I went over to Enterprise, got with the county sheriff over there because the residence was outside the city territory of Enterprise out in the county. I got with the sheriff of the county and said, okay, here's the situation. Do you know this guy? Oh, I know Wayne. He's a great guy and all this. I said, okay, the problem is you need to keep this to yourself. Here's what we have. I explained the situation. And he said, no problem. He says, no one else will know about this. He and I actually went out and did the first drive-by surveillance in my car of the residence and the workplace where O'Farrell had established his home and his workplace. And I took pictures of both, got as much information on O'Farrell as I could from the sheriff, started going into databases that we had. I was out there, and they actually flew the supervisor I talked to and the agent that I talked to in Mobile in the Bureau plane to get them on the ground in Enterprise and start working the case. It just absolutely exploded. Shortly after that, it kept snowballing into a bigger and bigger operation. We had 140 agents in Dothan working this case. The gist of it was that O'Farrell had typed these nasty letters complaining about his case being dismissed and not handled properly by the 6th Circuit. He was the one who put the bomb together and typed the labels on the typewriter and mailed these bombs out to these different people, and probably had gotten rid of the typewriter.
I love this theory. But this theory is the reason I'm asking you to talk about this case. But go ahead.
It was interesting to say the least. Again, I learned a lot. That's the theory. He typed up letters and the bomb labels, but then after the bombs went out, he got rid of the typewriter. It had to be somewhere he thought was safe to dispose of it. Well, the theory surfaced, and it really wasn't backed by any probable cause I was aware of other than it could happen, was that he broke the typewriter up into small pieces and flushed them down the toilet in his house. I was told that we were going to do, we meaning me, was going to serve a search warrant on Eufaula's septic tank because he was on septic, not city water and sewage. I was handed a search warrant and a crew of agents and a backhoe and a pumper truck to empty the septic tank. This parade went out to Eufaula's house. I had to go up and knock on his door and tell him, well, Mr. Eufaula, sorry to bother you. John McMurtrie, FBI Dothan office. I have a search warrant for your septic tank. Literally, he says no. I said, yeah. And I showed it to him. I said, here's the warrant. When he got done laughing, because I needed to know where it was on his property, he says, I can't tell you with any certainty. He says, I think it's over there. And he points a direction. We had the backhoe operator come in. And I told him, I said, do as little damage as you can. Where he had indicated there were plants that were planted. These are mature plants out in front of the house. That's where he said it was off to the one corner of the front of the house. He eventually found it, but he was pulling plants out, like gently scooping these plants out of the way and setting them off to one side so he could replant them afterwards. He eventually dug down and he hit the lid of the septic tank. And it was awful. I mean, he excavated it, and then the backhoe, he put a chain to it, wrapped a chain around the lid and pulled it off. Eufaula's watching all this with his family, mind you. This is like broad daylight in the morning, and his family's there watching. He says, well, at least I'll get a free cleaning of my septic tank. I haven't had that thing pumped out in 13 years. It was awful. It was full. There was a layer, almost like a frozen layer on top of it. I don't know if it was still doing its job or not, but it was full. The pumper truck drains it, basically gets down and sucks all the contents out of it. We left, and backhoe operator cleaned up as much as he could. The plan was to take the truck over to the local sewage treatment plant. We were going to pump it out slowly, the contents, and spray them off and examine them.
Oh my goodness.
It's as bad as it sounds. This is 6 o'clock early evening. We get over there and somebody brought chicken wire, and there was an open trench coming into the sewage treatment plant that was live sewage from like one part of the plant to where it went into the treatment area. It was in concrete. It was probably about 2 feet deep and maybe, a foot and a half across wide, this trench in the concrete that was built in. What they did was they laid the chicken wire down crosshatch, one section down, and they laid another across it the other way, basically. So it acted as a strainer for us to pump all this stuff out of the pumper truck, which was backed up in this concrete area next to this trench. Then it would go into the general sewage treatment of the plant. So they backed the truck in. They put the chicken wire down. They hook up the pipe that goes from the pumper truck over to where the chicken wire is. The driver of the pumper truck slowly starts pumping this stuff out.
Years of sewage that has come from this house.
Yes. And I have on my own leather boots that I had in the trunk of my car and a cotton one-piece zip-up to try to protect my clothing that the sewage treatment plant people use and say, here, you can borrow this, and then throw it away when you're done. So I start with a hose. They rigged up a hose, brought it over to where the chicken wire was in this trench, and I start spraying this stuff off as it comes out. It's probably the nastiest job I ever had to do as an agent through my 28-year plus career. It was just awful.
Let me just reiterate that you have absolutely no proof, reasons, concrete information to indicate that he took this typewriter and broke it up into pieces and threw it down his toilet. Nothing.
Nope.
Whose idea was it again that this may have occurred?
One of the supervisors who was brought in.
And was that supervisor out there with you?
No.
Okay.
Nope. I got to give him credit. One of the agents that came in on the TDY, the temporary duty assignment to come work the case, because again, we had 140 agents total, including us. There were 136 agents that didn't work there that were brought in to help. He actually stuck with me throughout this period. I give him credit. I want to say he was out of headquarters. I think he worked in maybe the lab or one of the other offices. He was really very helpful because he took over. He spelled me on the hose when it just got very tiresome to be doing it. The bad thing was it backed up. We wound up ankle deep in sewage over this big concrete area that was wide open where the pumper truck had backed in because it didn't go down through the chicken wire very well, and the excess went off to left and right. So we immediately had puddles of sewage at our feet when we were doing this. So you couldn't really kneel down. You didn't want to. You had to stand there and like spray off as the stuff oozed out of this pipe from the back of the pumper truck onto the chicken wire and then kind of went down into the trench below. You could do a profile of the family based on what we found. I'll let it go at that. It was just not nice.
Oh my goodness. The bottom line is, did you find pieces of typewriter?
Not a one. And we got to do it again at his business.
Oh no.
Yep, same thing.
This same supervisor thought, well, if he didn't break it into pieces and throw it down the toilet of his home, maybe he did it at his place of business.
Because it's also on septic. We got to do it a second time.
Oh my goodness. Again, based on absolutely zero information that this could have happened.
I don't know how they got the warrant from the magistrate's office. I really don't, because it had to be all, well, this is known to be done, so it might have happened here, and this is known. People try to destroy things and hide them, and maybe he flushed it. People have flushed stuff down toilets before.
Not typewriters.
No. When I heard about it, I thought, you have to be kidding me, and they weren't. Wow. But they were so desperate.
Well, what a team player. You are like a unbelievable team player, because I think many agents would have said, sorry, this is preposterous. I'm not doing it.
It was a learning process, and I learned what I could potentially put up with. It was almost like an out-of-body experience doing the whole thing, because I thought, I cannot believe we're doing this.
At this time, you have just 2 or 3 years in the Bureau. Would Special Agent John McMurtrie, who had been in the Bureau serving in the Newark Division for 10, 12 years, would he have taken on this assignment?
I would have found a younger agent who needed to learn things like this, because they need the experience.
Oh my goodness, good answer. Yeah, because most new agents would have just done it, even though they would have been not happy.
Exposed.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, most veteran agents would have said, I'll only do it if you, supervisor, come out here and do it with me.
And then for doing this great work, I got rewarded by being transferred to Newark.
And anybody reading your book, which I hope they do, will be able to learn about how much you enjoyed your experience in Newark, especially your commute.
Oh my. So many stories came out of the commute. It was a constant source of humor among us.
All right, but I do want to let everyone know, and maybe you don't even know this, but the person whose septic tank you pumped and reviewed the contents of, that person, Wayne O'Farrell, just died just a few weeks ago at the age of 81. And I do have a newspaper article that I was able to find where it talks about him having been a suspect in the murder of federal judge Robert Vance. I'll have that article in the show notes. And I'll also have a link to a history post from the FBI website about this famous case of Judge Vance's murder, so they can learn about who the real suspect was and about that investigation. After reading your book and reading this chapter, I just had to have you talk about it here, because it was just an investigation technique or tool that I had never heard of before, and hope that no other agent will ever have to experience again.
Yeah, it qualifies as the low point in my career. It was the worst thing I ever had to do. It took 3 hours to empty the truck. We were there from 6 to 9 p.m. when we finally finished up and the pumper truck was completely empty. Because at the end of it, we sprayed down the inside to make sure nothing was still stuck in there that we wanted to take a look at. I got home about 10 o'clock that night with my nasty leather boots still on. I'd thrown away the coveralls, the one-zip coveralls, because they were just cotton disposable. And I threw that away. But I had to take my boots off outside, get my hose, spray those off, clean those to some extent, and just let them dry out. I was just covered with the stuff.
And then you did that again at his business.
Yep, several days later.
Wow. Wow. Well, I hope everybody had a chance to enjoy that quote unquote case review as much as I did. Let's move on to the part of this interview where we get to know a little bit about your origin story. So I'm asking you my standard question of when and why you joined the FBI. It certainly wasn't for assignments like the one that we just talked about.
No, that was not on my radar personally. For background, I was in high school probably about 16 years old, roughly 15, 16. One of my fellow students, her father was an agent in the town I lived in outside Pittsburgh. He was a Pittsburgh division agent, but he was assigned in the town that we lived in. And I asked her one day, I said, could I talk to your dad about what he does, what his career is? Because I knew about being a trooper. My dad was a trooper, became a trooper in 1964. I was born in 58 and grew up with him being a trooper. So I was well aware of the job being a trooper and wanted to be one in Pennsylvania. She set up an interview with him, and I went to their house and sat down with him probably for a half hour, 45 minutes. He explained what he did as an agent, what was different from, because he knew my dad was a trooper, so he explained the difference between the two positions. So I had kind of like the genesis of the interest at that point, but really wanted to be a trooper. So I go off to college, I get a degree in criminology, I get hired at the age of 22 as a trooper in Pennsylvania, enjoy the job, thoroughly enjoy the job. I was good at what I did. I got good performance reviews. And in the first part of my book, I talk about that as far as, just really enjoying being a trooper and all the things that went with that, plus the things I didn't enjoy. I was on the job for 6 years as a trooper, and a friend of mine had also gone through the academy, Pennsylvania State Police Academy, 10 weeks before I had became a trooper, but he left to become an agent about a year and a half to maybe 2 years before this. So he had about 4 years on the job, maybe a little bit more than that, when he left to become an agent. I called him. He was based in Louisiana, and I called him and I said, what is the difference between the two jobs? How do you like being an agent? At the conclusion of that conversation, I thought, I really need to look into this. Well, I made application to become an agent. I called the Pittsburgh office. That was the area I lived in Pennsylvania. I said, what do I need to do? They said, you've already done it. You've contacted us. We'll send you a package out. And it went from there. That was in 96, probably late summer, early fall 96. I wound up being hired as an agent the following fall. I got sworn in September of 1987. So I was on the state police for a total of 7 years before I became an agent.
And then after graduating from Quantico, your first assignment was to the Dothan RA in Mobile, and then you went to Newark. And then what happened?
My wife and I thoroughly enjoyed being in Dothan, except for this case that I was telling you about. It was almost like reverse culture shock when we got down there. It was like, wow, this is really different. It's New Year's Day and it's 75 degrees, and we're calling home to the Pittsburgh area to talk to our family members, and there's 2 foot of snow on the ground. We really fell in love with the South. We were down there 3.5 years, left in April of 91 to go to Newark. I absolutely detested being in Newark. Not the people I worked with. They were great people. We worked really good cases. It was a target-rich environment, so to speak. There was all kinds of work to do. I was on a drug squad for 3 years, on a violent crime squad the next 3.5 years. That's when I finally got transferred out. We looked at the southern offices on the preference transfer, which is a mechanism for agents to try to get transferred where they would like to be as to where they happen to be, where the Bureau sent them. And it's all based upon seniority and openings within divisions. So I looked at all the southern offices, and the Memphis office looked to be about the best candidate for us to get back down south somewhere, which was the goal. Because I came home one day, I think it was 95, 96, the winter of 95, 96. It started snowing in Pennsylvania. We were based in Easton, Pennsylvania, and I was working in Newark. I had an hour and a half commute just to get to work. It started snowing in November, and it never went away until about March. It got deeper and deeper. And I came home one day and I said to my wife, I said, how much do you really want to move back to Pittsburgh, to the Pittsburgh area, to be by family? She said, why? What do you think? I said, we can go anywhere. The entire country, we can put a request to go anywhere in this country. How long it's going to take to get there is dependent upon my seniority. And at that point, I had 9 years on and the list for that office. But what do you think? So that's when we reviewed the offices at work, and we both agreed. I put in for Memphis. In those days, they changed it so you could request a specific resident agency. Well, I requested Clarkville, Cookeville, Columbia, and Nashville in Tennessee as offices I wanted to go to. I wound up being selected to go to Nashville the following year in September of 97. So we transferred, and we spent 20 years living south of Nashville in Franklin, Tennessee, until we moved to Knoxville to be closer to family. That was it. That was the career.
And for those who are listening, there is no longer a Memphis division, a Memphis field office. That has now been incorporated with Knoxville, which also used to be a field office, into the Nashville division. Well, you certainly have had an interesting career. You've been in 3 different offices, and you wrote about all of it in your book, your memoir. All of these stories and all the things that happened during your career are all in your book. FBI Agent on the Outside, Pennsylvania State Police Trooper on the Inside, or How I Went from the Big Hat to the Little Badge. It's a fascinating tale of your career. Why did you decide to write it? Because a lot of people say they're going to write a book, but they never get around to doing it. But you did.
I had been thinking about it for quite some time. I wound up with a medical problem. I had open heart surgery. I had a lot of time on my hands when I was recuperating afterwards. I had a bad valve. They replaced the valve at Vanderbilt, did a fantastic job, had a fantastic surgeon. But I had all this time to recuperate, and I wound up sitting in our kitchen on my laptop writing this. I kind of always had it sketched out in my head. If I was going to do it, how would I do it? What would I include? And it became like a steamroller. The more I got into it, the easier it was to think, okay, I want to structure it this way, include this, move this around. I thought, why not? So I wrote it and got it published.
Well, very nice. I know that it is available on Amazon.
Barnes & Noble, and I think there's 10 other less prominent sites that also carry it. It's coming out as an audiobook at the end of August.
Thank you for sharing part of your FBI journey with us today. I'd like to give my guest the last word. What would you like to say?
I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Writing the book was actually a good bit of fun, and I tried to have fun with the book, and I hope whoever picks it up and buys it or gets the audio or the ebook version enjoys it as well. That's why it was written. It's just one take on one agent's career. And that's so funny. I think our host would also agree. Jerry, there's like endless varieties of careers that agents can have depending on where they wind up and what they wind up doing. I think no two experiences are the same.
And that's the end of the interview. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a direct link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com, where you'll find a photo of retired agent John McMurtrie, as well as case-related images and links to articles about the police corruption case in Eufaula, Alabama, and the Judge Vance mail bombing. And, of course, there's a link to where you can purchase John's memoir, FBI Special Agent on the Outside, Pennsylvania State Police Trooper on the Inside, or How I Went from the Big Hat to the Little Badge. There's also links to more FBI Case File Review episodes featuring police corruption. I hope you enjoyed the interview and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. You can show me just how much you liked it by buying me a coffee. There's a link in your podcast app's description of this episode, or you can visit jerrywilliams.com and tap on the little coffee cup icon in the bottom right-hand corner of my website. Don't forget to follow FBI Retired Case File Review on your favorite podcast app. Now, this podcast is all about true crime, but if you're also interested in crime fiction, once a month via my reader team email, I keep you up to date on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. When you join my reader team, you get access to my FBI reading resource, a colorful list of more than 70 books about the FBI written by FBI agents who have been guests on this podcast. There's nonfiction, crime fiction, true crime, and memoirs. You'll also get my FBI reality checklist where I debunk 20 cliches about the FBI and receive news about what I'm up to and about my FBI nonfiction and crime fiction books. I want to thank you for listening to the very end. I hope you come back for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.